Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. This is our volume 2 of our Claude webinar series, Unlocking AI for Social Impact. Today, we're going to cover how Claude in your finance workflows can support. So I'm Alan, I'm based in São Paulo in Brazil. I'm today with my colleagues Asidas, Katrina, and Shama. Asida's based in Europe, Katrina also in Europe, in London, and Shama in India. Today, Asida's is also in India, by the way. What we want to cover today is basically start with an introduction to both Claude Cowork and Claude for Excel, and that's the first time that we are touching those two tools. We'll give you an overview of these tools. I'm going to do that introduction and how they can support you and your team. Then the second one, we are going to jump into demos and we are going to see Claude in action. Katrina and Shama are the ones that are going to help us with that. The first demo, we are going to see Claude AI, and it's going to bring some financial programmatic data together in portfolio analysis. Second bit, we're going to have actually, we show some MCP connected to an ERP, in this case, Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, also with Salesforce and App Impact running on top of Salesforce, and how Claude Cowork can do an automatic multi-source report generation. Then the last bit we're going to cover is going to be the Excel part of today's demo. And we're going to show a little bit how the Claude for Excel can help you with some budget modeling. Then finally, just to close out, there are some resources to help you get started, where to start, how to chat with us, and some resources for you to get on. Okay, a little bit before we jump into Claude Vera solution. So we were born to amplify the impact of the social sector. We do that through technology because AI has been proven to support organizations like yours quite a bit. We have jumped right into it and we are doing very fun and nice stuff around AI. We started 16 years ago out of a nonprofit like yours, so we know the pains, we know how the sector works. And since then, we've been doing a lot of work. We are very global, as you can see here. In this journey, we've done a lot around Salesforce. In the beginning days, we have amplified that to different technologies. And then more recently, we've jumped into AI and more specifically in a partnership with Anthropic that you're going to see in a little bit. We continue doing that old work in terms of implementation of systems and are now more recently getting to the AI realm. So just as a refresher for those who were not here with us on March 17th, we did our first part of the webinar, which was basically the introduction of Claude for nonprofits. The recording is available. The pieces that we covered back then was document generation. So generating a funder report in that case using Claude skills. Second one was around the MCP connector that we have created ourselves for Salesforce, more specifically for App Impact. And then third one was just showing a little bit the connected workflows and what is possible. In that case, we use Claude, Gmail, and Asana, everything in one place, one space. So now into Vera and Anthropic, our partnership. The organizations are very much alike. That's why we felt the connection and felt very comfortable to dive into this relationship that has been very fruitful for all of us and hopefully for all of you. We are two mission-driven organizations. I'm going to touch in 2 points only here because we have explained this in the past, but like one very important point for us is privacy. So there is strong privacy guaranteed and transparency into how your data is protected with Anthropic. And then the fact that Anthropic take very seriously the access to technology. There is an offer of 75% off of the list price to get products off Anthropic, and more specifically Claude for nonprofits, which gives you the team plan, which basically covers Claude Code, Claude Cowork, and basically everything that you need to be successful and everything that we are going to show today. So what is this? So when we're talking about Claude for Nonprofit, what does it cover? One thing I didn't mention is Claude has, or Anthropic has, benefit deployment department that is specific for organizations like yours, social impact, environmental impact organizations. So basically, Claude for Nonprofits, it offers the Claude for Enterprise and APIs at the price of 96 USD per user per year for the eligible organizations, which is basically 501c in the US and others similar in other countries. There are connectors like pre-built connectors, and others are coming up with Candid, Benavity, and Blackbaud. And then partners, Vera is one of the four implementation support partners of Anthropic. And then there's enablement like free AI fluency courses and blueprints online. So how can we use Claude? There is a browser version that is available. There are the MCPs that most of you probably have heard of. If not, it's an ecosystem. It's a standard that Anthropic themselves have started in the AI world and is now being used pretty thoroughly. There's the Claude API, which you can use to integrate different systems, a little bit more involved, but it is available. Then Claude Cowork, which is something on your desktop that you can use, and you give access to this program application into your desktop. It connects to all your files and your computer itself, and then interacts with the large language model, doing lots of fun stuff. And then finally, one of the add-ins that Claude have done is this one for Excel that we are going to show today. So I'm going to cover very briefly two pieces, the Claude Cowork, some specificities around it, and then the Claude for Excel. On the Claude Cowork bit, there is the possibility of having the agent going opening your files. So if you store files on your computer, you can just put some commands and it is going to go through and create files, read files, and do, of course, only things that you want and you ask them to do. But it can interact with that and hand you back the results. Then you can start something, walk away, and then come back. So you don't have to be in front of the screen. You can leave it and things will run in the background as you do other things. It's the very first AI that is in your computer and can interact with all of that. There is, of course, the underlying assumption that it is for human oversight. So there is nothing that is going to happen without you doing it and commenting it. You set it once. There are recurring tasks that can be set. So things that you usually do with your computer, with your files, you don't need to worry about those anymore. You can set them up and it will take care of it itself. And then you don't need like very deep technical skills. It's all user-friendly for people like me and you. If you don't have deep code knowledge, you can quickly learn and use it. Then last bit before we get into the Claude in action, the Claude for Excel, which is for all of you from finance that use Excel and have Excel as your best friend. You can have that as a sidebar on your computer. So you can ask your spreadsheet some questions instead of navigating through tabs on the sidebar. You can interact with your data. You can fix broken formulas in seconds, and we are going to show a couple of those in the demo. You can update some assumptions across the full model that you have if you have a more involved Excel model for your workflows. You can turn complex multi-tab workbooks into insights, so you don't have to go and navigate through everything. It will support you around that. You can very quickly go from raw data to pivot tables and charts. Again, just using natural language to interact with your file. And then you can save the best workflows in one click for as skills for your full team to use. Okay, without further ado, I hand it over to my colleague Katrina that will start talking about the use cases that we are going to see today.
Great. Thanks, Alan. We are going to introduce this fictional organization called Bright Futures Foundation and center our demo story around this organization. They're focusing on empowering youth and strengthening communities. And we can think of them as an international organization that manages some of its own programs and projects and also works with partners to implement some of those programs. Their funding comes from various public and private funders. And like some of the 450 organizations that we've worked with over the last 16 years, they have very similar problems. So they need to conduct portfolio analysis to look at real-time program insights across various tools and systems. They need to conduct donor reporting. They have over 10 institutional funders, and they each have unique reporting requirements, and that requires a lot of manual work. And they need to do some budget modeling. Their projects progress at different speeds and their funding progresses at different speeds, and they regularly conduct scenario modeling across their various program budgets. So Shama is going to share a bit around what their current technology stack looks like, and then we'll dig into some demos.
Thanks, Katrina. So Bright Futures operates programs across 12 countries, but their financial data lives in Business Central as their ERP system. So think of incoming funds from their donors, expenses that they incur, as well as any disbursements that they send to their partners. And their programmatic data lives in Salesforce and AMP Impact. So it has all of the information around the risks and the outcomes and outputs, indicator results, as well as any planning of the expenditures for those projects and programs. But these two systems, they don't meet. And a multi-year project called Skills Academy is in implementation right now. Leadership is heading into their Q2 board meeting with no clear picture of what is on track, what is at risk, and where to reallocate. So pulling a portfolio view currently takes two analysts 3 days, and let's see how they use Claude tools instead to get this done. So first we look at a rather simple conversation with Claude Chat. Claude Chat is like a quick query layer. You ask once and Claude connects live to your program management system and ERP tool, and it gets the reconciled answer on the spot. So here we can see that a user at Bright Futures enters a prompt such as check the actual expenses incurred for Skills Academy in Business Central, and show the progress against planned expenses. So Claude goes straight into AMP Impact, resolves the project by name, pulls the full planned budget across all categories and subcategories. You can notice how AMP is also, when we see the final results, you'll see that it also identifies gap. That is, there are no actuals being captured in Salesforce or AMP Impact. Simultaneously, Claude is also hitting Business Central and pulling every posted invoice and credit memo for this project. It's mapping the raw GL account codes to the same budget categories in Salesforce, and then it's reconciling all of that information. This task usually takes a finance officer half a day. So once Claude has done its pulling of query, you'll notice that it renders the information in the format of an interactive dashboard. So we will very shortly see KPI cards, progress bars, variance flags, and all of this will be visible directly inside the chat itself. So what you're seeing right now is a widget view that is available within the Claude chat, and you could also have an downloadable HTML version that you can use. But here now we can see how there's an overall burn rate of 60%. Clearly, air travel is insanely high, and probably that's a flag that needs an immediate explanation. Personnel also looks severely underspent. So now Claude is actually also flagging that this could be a GL miscoding and not an actual underspend, which means that it could also probably help you find any data discrepancies. So that's actually Claude in a chat layer, which is a quick query layer. Now let's look at Cowork, which is where Claude can do something that takes more time and can do a bit more complex task autonomously. So for Bright Futures, every quarter, someone is pulling they're spending a lot of time to put together this donor report, right? Let's have Claude Cowork do it for them. We'll start with what the donor actually asks for. You're looking at an assumed quarterly progress report. Let's say this is a template that was shared to Bright Futures by a donor such as FCDO. It might have 9 cover page fields, 8 sections, some annexes, and so on. If you look at this section 3, there's a financial table. So let's assume that FCDO wants 5 columns, total budget spent to date, this quarter remaining, so on, broken down by budget line. They also want variance explanations for anything over 10% and 50,000 pounds. And then when you look at section 2, they're also asking for log frame progress. So 1 log per output, RAG status, narrative, challenges, actions, and so on. They might also have included some annexes in the template. For example, this Annex A over here is a full indicator tracking table that they want. So maybe 1 row per indicator. So every single one of these cells needs to be populated from 2 different systems, Salesforce for the programmatic side and Business Central for financials. And that's what Cowork will do. For Bright Futures, of course, it's Salesforce and Business Central, but it's the same capability for the program management and ERP tool that your organization might be using. So let's see, this is the Skills Academy that they are tracking in Salesforce. This is where the program team manages everything. So partners, indicators, results, risks, work plan. If you notice the fields at the top, there's a project name, status, implementation, start and end dates, funding amount. All of this will go straight onto the cover page of the report. And because this is also where Bright Futures does the entire project setup, it will also include information around implementing partners. For example, Banda Foundation in South Africa, or perhaps a few local partners in Brazil and Kenya, as well as funders such as FCDO and Acro Foundation, which is a co-funder. So Cowork reads this list and populates the implementing organization field on the cover page of that report, and it builds the partner financial table as well. They also use Salesforce to track their outcomes, outputs, and indicator results. So here we can see we have the outcomes, but also we can see in the results tab, the results for different indicators for Q1. This one is specifically for Brazil, but you will probably have information captured for all the geographies where I work. So now Salesforce is also being used to track the risks. So I have identified a few risks over here, and perhaps Kenyan shilling depreciation is marked as really high risk, and it probably needs attention from FCTO. It should be flagged in that report that I want. Now we are looking at a Business Central instance for Bright Futures, and this is where half of the information of my report comes from, where my actual expenditures are living, and where my project dimensions and Skills Academy project is sitting. So let's maybe look at a few invoices and see how that translates into the report. For example, 108042, this is an invoice for Banda Foundation for USD 10,000, and it's dated for 21st March. Now, this is a partner disbursement. So Cowork picks this up, converts it into GBP at the period average rate, and then this becomes the disbursed to date figure for Banda Foundation in the section 3.4 of the report. So the amount that we're seeing of £8,000, we know is the actual that was spent. Now let's look at 108075. This is an expense for John Bond, which is it's a consulting invoice for a GL account of 68140. And here it gets interesting. Cowork noticed that GL 68140 has no corresponding planned expense in Salesforce. And that's a data quality issue that would normally get caught maybe at final review. Now, Cowork will flag this automatically in the variance section report, in the variance section of the report, and so that it flags for the finance team that this needs attention before you submit it. So now I can see a list of all the line items, including 108075, and finance team knows what to look at. Let's look at maybe 2 more. So 108043 and 108044. These are expenses that we actually incurred in Q1. So airfare in February, office rent in February, but in my accounting system, they were only posted in April. So if you run a report purely on posting dates as a cash basis report would, these costs would disappear. Now, FCDO accepts accrual basis reporting, so Cowork includes them. And the report, when I go back to the section of the report where I have all of this summarized, it correctly shows the number £62,640 and not £48,800, which you would have seen if it was on a cash basis. And that's a difference of £13,840, which is otherwise that would need a lot of manual adjustment in Q2 for you to catch that. So how does Cowork actually do all of this? You talk to it like a colleague. You say, hey, draft the FCDO quarterly donor report for Q1 for this project Skills Academy. You perhaps give the code in Business Central, and then Cowork activates a donor report skill. It's a pre-built workflow that knows the FCDO template structure. It knows Salesforce API and the Business Central API. It first resolves the project, queries Salesforce, finds Skills Academy, and confirms the Q1 2026 reporting period exists. It might also ask you to confirm before it does anything. But once it has confirmed, it runs through all the different phases that's defined in the skill. So in this instance, it's pulling organization roles, indicators, results, risks, and work plan from Salesforce. And it's also pulling general ledger entries and purchase invoices from Business Central. And then it's running a validation script that checks every budget line for variance breaches and every indicator for missing results. So this validation is actually clean. There is zero error, and the three warnings or the few warnings that we are seeing, they're all expected. So office and overheads variance, the GL 68140 mapping issue that we saw earlier, the native section needing an additional partner, all of that is flagged, but everything else is populated and ready. And what we are now seeing is the final output. So let's actually trace a few data points from the source to report. This cover page has the reporting period, Q1 2026, which comes from Salesforce. My project code of FCDO EDU 2527 comes from Business Central. If I scroll down to section 1.2, we can see a few key highlights. I'm sorry. For example, we see 886 as youth completing a vocational module. This number 886 is actually a sum of all of the individual results that come from Salesforce, and it's aggregated across Kenya, South Africa, India, and so on. So Cowork did that arithmetic. Now, if we look at the financial table in section 3.1, this is also where the total budget of 112,000 is actually coming from Salesforce's financial line items, but the actual expenses are spent to date. That's coming from Business Central. So this 8480 is actually an expense that was made for my airfare vendor as well as for a domestic travel by one of my employees. And then section 3.4 as well shows partner disbursement. So Panda Foundation, we agreed a budget of £16,800, but we can see that so far we have disbursed £8,000 from Business Central. And this link of what was planned in Salesforce and what's the actual in Business Central, this is made automatically by Cowork. And Cowork is also quite explicit about what it can't do. So every section where human input is required is also clearly marked. And these aren't really gaps. They are more verification and review that the program team should do. So then the system handles the data assembly and your team handles the context and the judgment. So when you see needs, input, and points like that, those are your markers as your checklist for submission. So now we see that a report that could have taken 3 to 4 days now just takes one conversation and a review. Your data is live. It's pulled from Salesforce and Business Central, and you can draft based on actual numbers. So that's Cowork for donor reporting. And I'll hand over to Katrina to show what some workflows might look like in Claude for Excel.
Great. Thanks for that, Shama. Very exciting knowing what we hear often from clients. We're also getting a few questions come in. Please continue to bring those in. Shama, Sadis, and the team will begin to answer those, and we'll follow up with them if we don't get to them all. Great. So let us look at the Excel add-in. So many organizations use Excel. There's some exciting opportunity to bring Claude into it. We have a complex financial workbook here for the Bright Future Skills Academy. So that's the project that the Bright Futures is implementing that we just saw from Shama. This includes budget projections, actual spend data, and key program assumptions. Our goal is to use Claude to automate a multi-year budget forecast and then also build interactive analysis tools without writing these formulas ourselves. So let's look at, we can see a little bit of what it's doing here and our budget in here. We're going to, while Claude works on this, we'll see that it's processing several steps. So this isn't just a kind of simple copy paste, but Claude is actively testing its own logic here. It's currently verifying the approved budget headers and checking for data consistency across these. In long sections like this, Claude is actually kind of catching some of the small errors. So something like a mismatched category name or a hidden row that might just typically break with a standard Excel macro. It's kind of essentially performing a real-time audit of our data before it even attempts to actually do the calculations. Once it identifies bad data, it takes your permission to clear and fix it. So we have to respond to it in the chat there. That includes fixing any bad formulas, applying recalculations, and so forth. Here we can see that the add-in creates projections on a new sheet using two methods. So we'll advance into these new projections. We're certainly seeing how it's calculating these here and asking for our input. And as we look at the new sheet, we can see that the actuals-based growth projection, as well as the actuals versus budget adjustment. And at the end of this, we'll eventually get a summary for both of these methods. So we'll continue to chat to it here, and we'll slowly get a summary. We can also do some scenario planning and build out the business logic. So as we move into scenario planning, we can ask Claude to build 3 different models. So we'll ask it here in a moment. First is the optimistic model, the next is the base case, and then the conservative. So we'll wait for it to build it out. Great. And as we watch this sidebar here, we're starting to see its reasoning and how it scales variable costs, such as training materials and stipends based on beneficiary numbers. And it's also keeping these fixed costs, like rent, for instance, stable. So it's applying to professional accounting principles automatically. We could also give it some guidance in terms of what should it apply there. Instead of returning kind of a value, error, and stopping, Claude is identifying the mismatch. It's explaining why the cell reference was off and correcting the formula logic. And essentially, kind of for all of us who work pretty regularly in Excel, it's debugging the spreadsheet in the background and ensuring that the final projections are just sound for us. So we can see it as it's continuing to do its work in our column here directly in our sheet. And we can see that it's coming out with our new scenarios. It's detailing the logic behind this, so we continue to get updates around this. And we can also continue to digest this as we're moving forward with getting these final scenarios. Great, we can adjust them. We can want to bring the human in the loop into this and continue to cross-check this with what we're seeing as it's doing its work here. We have a visual representation on the screen, and we're going to get into even some more visual representation. Great. So we saw all of that data, we saw that it produced it, and we also want to ask Claude to create a more visual of this, specifically a quarterly spend heat map. So in this case, Claude is applying conditional formatting to highlight spending peaks. It identifies that Q4 is consistently kind of our highest spend period due to year-end program activities, and it's providing an immediate visual insight for the leadership team. So we can see it's calculating the information here, and we'll get to see what a visual heat map looks like in action. In just a few minutes, Claude has transformed this raw data into a fully kind of projected, audited, and visualized financial model. And it's more than kind of just an add-in. It's, as we saw, serving as an expert analyst that kind of is cleaning, building, and correcting your work as you go. So there we have a few examples of how we can use Claude within some of our financial processes. Alan, I'll pass it back to you to close us out. You're on mute, Alan.
Okay, I am happy to close us out. So how can you get started? You can scan this to go to our landing page around Anthropic and some resources that you can do. So a very first recommendation is that you join Avera AI peer learning group. We have old friends and clients of ours as part of that. We have current clients, and we have other organizations that are not our clients yet, but are joining. It's free. And the plan is for us to, as lots of new things around AI come up, let's debate, let's exchange ideas. There is an AI readiness assessment that you can get access to, and we are going to then chat with you if you want. Then we can, you can also do a responsible Claude for Nonprofits pilot. That's something that we offer as well. We do AI strategy consultations as well. And we are open to chat with you about other things if none of these cover what you need next. So with that, final invitation for you. We have a third webinar with a date already. It's May 26th. And there we are going to cover from AI curious to AI leading, get a little bit deeper for you to start using Claude and start using AI in your own organization. So join us in about 4 or 5 weeks. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thanks all. See you next time.